I've had founders come into the office, see me, not having done research, which is like a slight problem, ask me for coffee. So when they ask me for coffee, I'm like, okay, well, how would you like your coffee? And I would give it to them.
And then they find out who you are.
And then I sit down and I'm like, now you may proceed. Now you'll remember not to do that again.
I did the same thing when I owned the television company. They would assume I was the admin and they would start asking me for stuff and I'd start getting it for them. They'd go, oh, you're the owner? And I'm like, yeah, I have to go mop the floor now. You know? Hi, everyone. Welcome to Navigating. Here at Navigating, we explore how people from all walks of life are finding their way through today's complex and changing world. On this episode, I'm really excited to have Ann Lai as my guest. As a young person, Ann excelled in science and math, then went to Harvard, where she got her bachelor's and master's and PhD. But now she's gone on to become a very successful venture capitalist. And as a woman, she's broken through huge barriers to get where she is today. Hi, Ann. I'm so happy you're here. What a story you have to tell.
Thank you.
No,
glad to be here this
It's
morning.
just kind of amazing. Before we even start talking about this switch you made from science and math to venture, I'd like to just hear about your life and what you were like as a little kid growing up and what might have inspired you.
Yeah, so I think my early life was interesting. So I was born in the US, but we moved back to Taiwan when I was really young, around 1.5, between 1 and 2. And we actually lived in Taiwan until I was 8.5, and then we moved back to the US. So
that's a big change. What was that like right away?
Well, first of all, this is the first time I saw snow was right after we landed in Cleveland.
Oh, wow.
So I was born in Cleveland, we moved back to Cleveland.
Yeah.
And so it was quickly very snowy. And that was really exciting. But I think a bigger part is just, I think it gives me they're very different cultures, right? I think in Taiwan, obviously everyone else looked like me, which I think is a very different way to grow up compared to other Midwestern Asian Americans.
Right.
But also at the same time, we were in the middle of cities, the streets were crowded, like everything was kind of always available and always around. And it wasn't even like moving to the US per se, it was moving to the suburbs of Ohio, where basically everything was very far apart. You have to drive everywhere, which was a very new experience. My mother didn't even used to drive that much. And then, we had to drive in the snow, etc.
That's a big change.
Yeah. So I think the tonality of everything is very different. And then also the way like schools run was very different. So in Taiwan.
So you'd gone through what would be like second grade, third grade here?
So I finished second grade
through
second grade in Taiwan, and I moved in third grade. So I think in Taiwan, it was very competitive from very early. We had like midterms and finals and like point rank systems. So I was first in the class by like decimals of points.
And you came here and you just shot ahead.
That was actually really interesting. So I didn't learn English at all. So even when I was really early, so I started talking really early and I started reading really early because I was really late. I was supposed to be born May 22nd or so, and I was born June 19th. So I came out like largest baby of the hospital for that half of the year.
And look at you now.
So I started speaking really early. I started reading really early, but it was all Chinese.
You were speaking Mandarin, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So my first language was actually Mandarin. So when I moved to Taiwan, it just kind of picked up from there.
Yeah.
And so when we were moving to the US, I think it was when my dad has many funny stories because he's like a very much academic. But when my dad was like, oh, you're going to have to learn English. So, you're going to school soon.
Better learn English.
Yeah. So I learned the alphabet on the flight.
Oh, on the airplane from Taiwan to here.
Yeah, that's when I started. And he was like, here's an
That's
alphabet.
so great. Your dad, he put the bug in your ear and you're like, oh,
so it was actually really interesting because you're going from like first in the class to basically not understanding anything that was going on.
Oh, wow.
So I think very quickly after that, I don't know the exact dates, but it was like maybe within like a month or so, school started. And so he gave me 4 cards. I remember one was basically like, I have to go to the bathroom. One was I have an emergency.
Cards to show to the teacher.
Yes. So we have a line of English and a line of Chinese. And I forget what the last one was, but the third one was like, what is my homework? And please write it down for me. So the priority was basically need to go to the bathroom, need to call my parents, and please write down my homework. And then I think it was like another logistical
that
part.
is really,
And so
that's very touching. That's a lot for a little kid to
yeah,
go
so I
through.
would go in, and basically you go from being like basically best in this very competitive environment to being like, I don't even know what's going on. So the first day I walked in, they were trying to tell me, this is your seat. Like, I remember this vividly. And it's in Ohio, so our school didn't have a lot of Asian Americans or Asians at all. And so we go into the school, and they're trying to tell me, this is your seat. I have no idea what they're saying.
You didn't
so
know
they
what
just
that meant.
spoke slower to me as if that would help. And I was like, nope, still don't understand. So they lined up every Asian-looking child, not Asian,
Not real Asian, but
what they think is Asian-looking child, and tried to have them translate.
and did they speak any?
So we had a very small population of Asians, so nobody was Mandarin, and so that didn't work. And then the neighboring like classroom teacher came in and just like pointed at the seat and sat in it. I was like, oh, I got it.
See, I was just wondering why they didn't do that to begin with. You know, I would have sat there and said this, and then pointed to you and said, sit here.
But it was just like a very funny opening to like American schools.
So this is really interesting though, because to go from first to confused, did that change you in such a way that it really stimulated that kind of that drive? Because clearly you have a huge drive to succeed. Do you think that was like sort of the beginning of that? Plus your dad, who's also very successful. And
so I think for me, it's never about the actual like perception of success. I think even when I was younger, I think my parents was very a big part of this. Like my parents always made me feel like whatever I wanted to do was possible. Mm-hmm. Like I think that's very atypical of that era of Asian parents. If I
they weren't too
was like,
strict
oh, I want to do this, they'd be like, okay. And then it would happen.
Yeah.
And then I think because I started, probably because I was really late as a baby, like that was a theory. And I basically could do a lot of things really early.
Yeah.
So they basically they basically stopped listening to all the developmental books about when things were supposed to happen.
Yeah, they threw away all the books of, child rearing and, here's what to expect at, 2 years.
Exactly. Yeah, so I think as a result, they never like restricted things I wanted to do. Like I wanted to play with different toys that probably were like, oh, that's way later, or like connect or whatnot, or read. And because like I was ingesting things very quickly and everything was kind of surprising, they themselves didn't put restraints on things I wanted to do. And so I think for them, it was very important, like to establish fundamental like ethics and how to be a good person and those kinds of values. Right. And so what I was reading or what I was digesting or how I behaved, like those are things that they tried to instill in me early on. But in terms of like what looks right or what is the smart thing or the good thing to do, it was never the way they taught me about why to do things. Mm-hmm. Right. So if I'm curious about something, I can go do it. And if I wanted to learn something else, they'll encourage me to do it. And whether or not they want me to do the best that I wanted to do, but I think they never wanted to encourage a more competitiveness than what came out of myself.
That just sounds like wonderful parents.
Yeah.
When you talk to them again, give them my regards and love, okay? Because there aren't a lot of parents who are like that. And
that's why I think a lot of retrospect, we'll get to like, the rest of life, a lot of people ask me, my mom has been like such a tiger mom. No, my mom is not a tiger mom. She tried to make me go to bed all the time. She'd be like, please stop working and just like go to sleep. Like you have a light curfew. And I would like have a flashlight and like keep reading if I wanted to. So I think everything I've ever wanted to do was because I wanted to do it and not because she or somebody else like coerced me, And so I think that's different. Bring it back to the coming to the US part, right? Yeah, like I think coming here, I just felt like, oh, this is a new challenge. This is like a new video
She's
game
like
level.
This. I can do this.
So it's not like I have to prove something to me. Like I knew I was I knew I was fine. Yeah. Right. It was just like, new language. This is going to be interesting. So honestly, best thing that happened was my table mate from back then. I think a lot of Asians refer to them as like anchor friendships, right? I think she was really helpful because I would just draw pictures and she would tell me what the English phrase was. And that's how because we had to journal every day in the morning. I'm like, I don't know what to write.
Helped you to have somebody.
So I would like draw a picture and I would draw a story and then she would like write it down for me.
And then so you could, oh, that's such a smart thing.
And then obviously we had like ESL support, etc.
Yeah.
And then I was a weird child. I went to the library and was like, give me all the children's dictionaries.
Dictionaries?
Yeah, like starting from like the children's dictionary and then the young adult dictionary. And like, that's how I like learned vocab. I just like memorized dictionaries by letters.
You didn't watch soap operas then, like some people do. I know people who learned English from watching soap operas. I'm like, oh, what did that teach you?
And then I also thought my parents did something very interesting. They only spoke to me in Mandarin in the home. So I could only speak to them in Mandarin or they'll pretend not to understand. And so I would only
Did they speak English out in the world? Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah. But my mom actually ended up teaching in the U.S. and my dad is a professor. So he obviously was at NASA also, et cetera. So they spoke English. The rule was we don't speak English in the house. And they would pretend to not understand anything if I used English with them. So I would have to necessarily speak Mandarin with them. Which also means I only practice English with native English speakers.
Oh, that's interesting
so
too.
A lot of people don't expect that English is like my totally second language because I kind of talk like an Ohio girl because that's why. Like
that's
every
how you learned
English practice while I was learning it was all from
peers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so that was really interesting. But I think what ended up happening was basically my math levels were really high. My science like comprehension levels were really high. Even a lot of this reading, but I was reading in Chinese, right? So I would say all the humanities took a long time to catch up because the English level had to like fully level up, right? But everything else, like once I can translate in my head, like jump very quickly.
Now that's really interesting. Science usually though is written in English, but math, I was just thinking it's a universal language. It's not something you had to translate for yourself.
The word problems.
Oh, there were word problems. So you did have
every time there's always this word problem like, oh, someone wanted 3 apples and 4 oranges. How many fruits did they have? I'm like, so until that translation happened. So basically all of my math blockers early on were word problems. I would see a block of gibberish, basically.
Oh my gosh.
And so, but once started translating, like, there was also all the like, I think in Ohio we had assessment tests that placed us into like gifted programs. So based on my math and science levels, I was like so far above that they placed me into the gifted program. But then they were also like, but your English is really bad. So you're going to be for 4th grade. I was in like 5th or 6th grade and then placed into like middle school for math classes basically. But they were like, your English has to start in the gifted program 1st grade. So I would go to the 1st grade class for English. And honestly, this is what I mean by like, it wasn't like, I feel like the reaction should have probably in retrospect and like you see in movies, et cetera, there should be more angst. There was not.
More trauma,
like
more
fun.
PTSD. no, I don't see any of that.
Oh, I'm like a big kid in a small kid class. I know. Great. And then it was just like, as things caught up, they would just move me into another class and move me into another class. And by the time I was in like, by the time 5th grade rolled around, I was in like normal class.
Oh, good.
Like
good.
Same level.
You probably set those goals for yourself too, though, to get to those upper classes, right? So then you kept going and you kept studying science and math and you went to Harvard.
Yeah, so even my science and math example is quite interesting. So for math, I remember I went to, I think it was pre-algebra, and I went to the teacher. I was like, I think this class is quite boring. Can I skip to the next one? And they were like, okay.
So that level of aptitude was,
But I was like, okay. They were like, okay. I was like, if I can test out of the final, can I just not take this year? And they said, okay, here's the book. You have like, I forget how long, but it was like this period of the summer and you come and you take this class and we'll skip you. And so I was like, okay. And then I did. And they were like, what? And so, but like, that's how my personality was as a child. So how I got into math and science was in middle school. I read about the Westinghouse. What used to be called the Westinghouse Science Competition, the Science Talent Search.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Now it's Regeneron. While I was doing it, it was Intel. So they have different sponsors.
Yeah.
But really famous, right? And so I read in one of the science books that there was like a female winner, finalist, et cetera. So I went to a private girls' school. So I tested it at a private girls' school. starting from 6th grade. But when I tested, they had me skip 6th grade. Originally, they wanted me to skip 6th and 7th and go to 8th.
And just go in math or in everything?
Everything.
Uh-huh.
And my dad was like, "You're a very small person.
Yeah.
Development is really important. Do you actually want to go to 8th grade, or like, do you care?" I was like, kind of do, but I understand what you're saying. So like, we actually only skipped 1 grade, but I think that's like how my parents were. That's what I mean. And so I was like, okay, I'll just do 1. And then so I go in, and so 7th grade, we're in this girls' school. It's very humanities focused at this time. They had a lot of support for humanities programs, but it was also a very open environment. I think that was a great school. It's called Hathaway Brown. And the motto is, we learn not for school, but for life. And for girls' school, I think it's great. We didn't have home ec. We didn't have like traditional girls' classes.
Good.
We had like wood shop. And
good.
they basically said you could do whatever you want.
That's unusual.
And they're very flexible. Like we had Latin class for 2 people because we cared. We wanted to take it, and they opened it for us.
And they opened the class for 2 people to learn Latin.
Yeah. And so like, I think that was a great environment for my personality, because this is what I did in, I think, when I was like 12 at this point. I went into the headmaster's, like the principal, I guess, head of school is what they're calling it. So I went into the head of school's office when I was 12, and I was like, I'm going to be a Westinghouse finalist. You don't have a science research program. So I'm going to go do research on my own, but can I get credit? Cool. And he used to tell this story a lot when he was still there. He was like, I was like, oh, interesting job, but okay. So then I basically started doing science research. I found a lab at Case Western Reserve, started doing research, etc. And then ended up at the International Science Engineering Fair sophomore year, won first place in my category.
What was your subject? What did you do?
I developed a MEMS sensor system that tied into the scrubbers that could clean sulfur dioxide, or detect and clean sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide to help reduce acid rain. And then my senior year project was on studying basically the pyrolysis, which is like how wood turns into gas, and therefore the burning rate of different types of wood, how that could be factored into like wildfire predictions. Basically, different trees have different burn rates.
Right.
Yeah. So basically, I won first place in sophomore year and junior year, and then senior year I won best of category. But I was also a Westinghouse finalist.
Great.
So
you got
and
your
then
wish.
Now that school has fully developed science program, because they were like, oh, look
what happened. We have a winner here.
Yeah. But I think it also emphasized a lot more the STEM education side for girls' school. So they became one of the best STEM programs for girls in the Midwest.
Which was so important when that shift started to happen and girls started to study science and math and felt good about it.
Because I think back then there was a lot of emphasis in like creative writing competitions or presentations or speech, even at the school. I mean, they were open, but traditionally that's where the trustees in the school wanted to focus. And seeing like the almost like the winning in the PR and the cycles that can also come from that, it helps kind of break that perception in a way. And also get more support around, oh, maybe we should have more balanced programs. And they actually now have like a really amazing bio lab. They have really amazing research programs. Their whole new wing has just like levels of labs.
That's so cool.
And, I think that was really interesting.
It's another way that you've been a pioneer. I mean, I was talking about you being a pioneer in venture, but I see what else is going on too. So then, did you apply to any other place besides Harvard, or was that a dream of yours?
I always felt like it was like, I think maybe it's just the Asian family or like Harvard. But I applied to Harvard. I basically applied to Harvard, MIT, Caltech, and Stanford. Because I wanted one on each coast, one liberal and one technical.
Did you get into all of them?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Somehow I knew.
So I ended up picking Harvard because I wanted to stay on the East Coast. No offense to California, always liked the East Coast better. And so, and then I really wanted to go to liberal arts school because I think I've always had more diverse interest than math and science. I think it was.
Well, no, that's interesting.
Suppose,
yeah,
right? Like,
no, it's interesting because that's what you excelled at.
Yes.
But at the same time, you had an interest in other things, obviously.
Yeah. So my senior year, everyone expected me to do. So we have a senior project before we have to graduate.
Right.
And senior year of high school, everyone thought I would just recycle. They would let me like use my science project as my senior project and just present it. And I was like, no, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to go do this humanities
Yeah.
project. And so
They're like, wait,
yeah, and all
we don't
through
know that about you.
yeah,
Right?
so all through high school, I also did a lot of art competitions. So basically, my senior project did like a big mixed media art show. I also originally really wanted to go to Brown, actually,
Oh, you
because
did?
Brown had the crossover program with RISD.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that was that was really not the best choice for my mother. I would say that was the
Yeah.
only time I was like, oh, it makes sense. In retrospect, it does make sense for some of where like the network goes and like the resources and the flexibility in the school. So
Right.
my mother was right, but during that time, I like really wanted to be an art student.
Did you apply to Brown at all, or no? She
No,
didn't
no,
want
so
you
I
to.
ended up not.
Yeah.
And so we talked through it. But I think, I think everyone has a phase where you're like, I'm gonna be an artist. I think what we agreed on is when I retire, I can go be an artist
Yeah.
for
Well,
fun.
it's another expression, and you don't even have to wait till you retire. Just whenever
Yeah.
I know you don't have a lot of time to do extra stuff, but I see people who love art, always wanted to be an artist, knew they couldn't support themselves, and yet they paint or they
Yeah.
sculpt. Somebody throws pots that I know, and meanwhile they have a business type of job,
Yeah. And
but
so, like, I think
it
I've
answers
always
that.
been really into art.
Yeah.
So I did, like I said, I did a lot of like competition stuff on the side when there was time for that.
Yeah.
But I think Harvard was a good place because they also had a really good visual environmental studies, which is their art and design program, where basically if you're in those classes, you can use anything in the studio material wise for free.
Mm-hmm.
So took a bunch of those classes.
What is that department again?
They call it VES, so visual and environmental studies.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, you can build these like 5 feet by 7 feet canvases.
Well, you
and
were
just do
interested in
whatever
the
you want.
environment too because of the acid rain project, right?
Yeah.
You already knew about
Their environment is more like
a different kind
design.
of. I
Yeah,
see what you're saying.
yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, but that department, just like you could take electives. So I did a bunch of painting classes, a bunch of whatnot, because like you just had infinite oils that you wanted to use if you're in those classes, which, as you know, was pretty expensive.
That just sounds wonderful. That sounds like heaven.
Yeah.
Heaven for the artist.
And my mom is actually a literature teacher originally. So I've always read a lot. So like all the electives outside of like math and sciences, I thought were a lot more interesting
That's so nice.
than going to like MIT for me.
Yeah.
So that's how I ended up at Harvard. So at Harvard, I took a lot of wide range of classes. And then did my undergrad and master's at the same time. So did my undergrad in chemistry and physics, and my master's in applied math related to like biomechanics mostly. And then my PhD was in fluid mechanics.
Fluid mechanics, I read that about you. So there, I think we're at that point where the big question arises of, after you had done all these things, where was it that you started looking at venture capital and thinking about helping businesses, helping raise up other companies and help them to succeed? Where did that come from in you think?
So I think I realized pretty early on. I originally was not going to do a PhD. I think my mom and I have had a long conversation about this, and she gave up a lot for us to be in the US. And the one thing she really wanted for me to do was get a PhD. That's part of the reason that I felt like I should. And there was also a lot of like science interest that I still wanted to explore, so it's fine.
So there was more to learn at the same time. Yeah.
But I realized during a PhD, there was a lot of it that was just focused on the tenure game and like grant writing.
Right.
So there was no way I was going to stay in academia. I knew from like basically the moment I entered my PhD program. I actually had a funny agreement with, I think I do a lot of these kinds of like atypical arrangements to break through like structures that I don't like. So I went to my PhD advisor and I was like, I know you want us to produce a lot of different results. If I have, 5 projects that are publishable, can I graduate? And then he was like, okay. In his head, he's probably like, oh, this
I like
is
that they all say okay. That's a really interesting thing. There's an interesting trait here because in order to do the work you're doing now, you have to be able to convince people of things. and you have a long history in your life of convincing people of things.
True.
You know?
Yeah. Look, I think I heard from a different department and of some of the other folks, it was like a lot of grad students have to generate publications. It's part of the exchange,
Yeah.
unsaid exchange in the environment. So I was like, okay, well, if you have a lot of publishable papers, can I just leave? Because I don't really want to go into academia, so I don't really need to build up the same track record, etc. But I also understand, like, teaching is the exchange, and like I feel like grad school is more of an internship exchange. So I'm gonna like do my part. So like, what is the quantitative, like the deliverable that you would like that we're mutually aligned on? So then I went to a lot of labs and I said, hey, I'm really good at doing experiments and I want to do a bunch of modeling. And a lot of the theories that you guys are applying is similar. So then I worked on a lot of different projects that kind of crosses over, and then kind of like parcel myself out to help with a lot of projects and hope 5 of them would happen. And then they did. So I did my PhD
So
in
you
like
got 5
3.5
publishable.
years.
Good.
So yeah, but that's how that happened. But I think because I recognized that in that exchange and how everyone was stressed about writing grants, I also wrote a lot of grants, DoD, DARPA, etc., especially in fundamental research. So a lot of fundamental research, especially currently even, right, is even more so, is hard to get grants. And even back then, you had to fit it into boxes that made sense for national grants so that you can actually do new discovery research that are frontier breaking. And I realized pretty early on that there are folks who are going to be amazing scientists because they just want to stay in this field and get deeper and better. And they like everything they want to do is science. And I realized like pretty early on that was not me. But I'm really good at understanding the science and problem solving the sciences, but also like the more soft skills about navigating different ecosystems or getting stuff done, right? Like outside of just like the research part. And so my theory was a lot of science was going to get increasingly privatized. So this is in like 2005, 6 was what I was already thinking about it. So more interesting science will become privatized in terms of like research funding, which we have seen.
Yes,
and
we've
so
seen that.
to do that, I was like, I have to get into business.
You have to find a way to. So basically, that was the crossover: how to raise money to support these people who are totally into science and have amazing ideas, but otherwise wouldn't have gotten the funding that they needed and create the things that they wanted to create. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will say, back then, the intent was originally not to be in VC. So, fun story is my PhD lab, original lab, and then the theory part was connected, worked on PDMS. So PDMS was the origination for microfluidics.
What does it? Say it again.
PDMS is a material that's used for like lab on a chip. So like microfluidics, lab on a chip, which we've now heard of in many media because of Theranos. Right?
Yes,
so our lab was the competitor to the lab that she interned at. And so we all knew that it wasn't going to work.
That's a lie, yeah.
So that was my first hearing about VC, was the funding of that. And all of us being like,
yeah,
do they not know how to do science diligence?
Oh my gosh.
Which, as we have all learned, is not why those funding rounds were done, right?
Yeah.
But, that was when I was like, I should be a VC because apparently people don't do diligence.
They don't know anything about science and they just... that's just really interesting.
Which sounds terrible now. Not saying that that's true. I'm just saying that was what I thought in the moment. I was like, why would you fund that?
I have to tell you, as an aside, I had the whole grade skipping thing too, and it was just bizarre for me. I had a different experience than yours, but I was like I went from kindergarten to 2nd grade, and kept going that way. So you did really good. You did great. It was a little traumatic sometimes for me, but it sounds
the age difference, especially that.
The age difference.
My dad was totally right. Had I skipped to 8th grade,
it
would have been way worse because it was like also a very, I would say, like privileged, mostly white school. Yeah. And, I think the puberty development is very different age-wise. And so it was pretty rough.
Yeah, the
for
physical
like 2
development thing that goes on. And I was behind even back then. And my friends are like, you're so young.
Oh, yeah. No, and then, girls are not the nicest back then. Like Mean Girls is real.
Mean Girls is a real thing.
And I think I had at first you kind of want to be everyone's friend, and then you hit a point you're just like, I'm just gonna say whatever I want.
Yeah.
If you're kind of scared, then you're probably also not gonna make fun of it because you recognize it comes from a place of insecurity.
Right.
Or that's what I realized in high school.
Years later,
I was like, no, like in high school.
Yeah.
Actually, I was like, this comes from a place of insecurity. So if you're going to try to attack me and my friends, I know what your insecurities are.
Oh, well, that's good. You could have been a
Probably
therapist too
not
with
the
this.
best response, but
Well,
hey,
listen,
fight fire with fire sometimes.
I think so. And when it comes to mean girls, no. But what I was going to say really is, I see a lot of venture people who are throwing money at things that they think they understand, but they don't understand. And it's like, no, don't waste the money if it's not really going to work. Like what you were saying earlier. I think having that knowledge that you have, the basic, that deep knowledge of science, people can pitch ideas to you, and you're going to know. I mean, tell me if this is true or not. You're going to know when they pitch to you if it's going to make sense or not.
Yes. But unfortunately, I did not fund science at all during venture for the most part.
No, there's a lot of science still doesn't get funded.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
So I guess we can continue on
Let's
the arc.
go on with the story.
Is quite...
The
arc is like halfway through.
Mm-hmm.
No. So so I graduated in 2009, which is not a great time to do venture in the sciences.
Yeah, because
or everything
was crashed down at that point.
So when I first graduated, I went to New York. And obviously the market wasn't great. So I worked on a couple of interesting projects. So this is how I got into big data. I got recruited by a firm that had an in-house team that was basically using data to study third-party calling. So these are the people who like third-party calling company.
Oh, third-party calling.
They're the ones who call you to sell things to collect debt.
Yeah.
Not the best place, but a professor from Columbia from econometrics was running with his PhDs a sub-team inside this division that basically used interesting data to try to forecast, like probability, how much you can collect, which phone numbers to call, etc.
Who's going to pick up? Who's going to hang up?
Exactly.
Who's going to swear at you?
Yeah. So basically it became almost like an experiment because he was running a kind of like experiment. This is how I got into like business analytics in the first place. So we went through and we were trying to like identify proxy variables, meaning like not the direct variables. Maybe it's like their zip code or how many times it rings or how long they take to answer a survey question, but not the survey question itself. I thought that was like a really interesting experience. And, I think I rabbit hole a lot. So for example, out there, people remember from Big City, I sat down and listened to like 1,000 recordings and recognized basically we were having these technical gaps and like mapped it out, etc. And then so from there, basically, that became what later known as big data, which back then we just called analytics.
What did you call it then?
We just called it like analytics or like business intelligence,
now it's called big data.
And then eventually, I think like when I came to Silicon Valley, that was the era of like what evolved into like big data, right? And so went from there, and actually because of that understanding, I worked at a firm that was basically pioneering a lot of how to use what is now called alt data for Wall Street. So any of the extra data that you can use to predict. Yeah. So like alternative data.
Right.
So basically we were looking at like credit card panels or like satellite imagery, et cetera. So you can like predict what the quarter earning numbers were going to be before the earnings call, more or less. And so
pretty accurately.
Yeah. So my group was responsible for vetting and sourcing new data and then mapping them to different ticker coverages. So yeah, but basically from there, how I learned I was like, okay, to predict tickers, I need to understand what mechanisms go into business. So if you think about it like a mechanics problem. So my background being like mechanical systems, right? I was like, okay, what are these like mechanics that go into businesses that are drivers?
Right.
So I went and just read hundreds of 10Ks and 10Qs for like a month, just hundreds across different tickers and different categories to see what people focused on for different predictors. And then kind of once I digested, then we went into the data and actually built a lot of models that were like incredibly accurate for predicting these numbers. Didn't love finance as a culture, obviously. There were many mini rebellions at that firm where I was like, oh, we have dress code. I will wear purple contacts. So I was like, you said there's a dress code. You didn't say there's like an eye color code. So I wore purple contacts. And I realized this is a funny story because you would go into meetings and people would just stare and be like, and in that moment, I think you have an edge of that conversation.
Because you've caught their attention.
Yeah. Or they're like, what is going on?
Once again,
besides like, oh, you're a young looking woman.
Once again, you're doing something different. Once again, you're doing something way outside the norm, right?
Yeah. And so did that. Then actually, I played a lot of video games also with my brother. That's like our bonding activity. We played a lot of League of Legends. So I was volunteering at these like large gaming conferences, so like PAX, etc., and helping run like the LAN tournaments on site. That's how I met the Riot Games folks. And they originally thought wanted to hire me on the event side. I was like, actually, I do data on Wall Street. And they're like, oh, we're also recruiting for the business intelligence team. Which is how I ended up at Riot as their like third ever PhD, working on a lot of what they used to call business intelligence, but then was insights, right?
Yeah.
So that's how I got into like effectively like startup in tech. Mostly through this big data channel. And my theory was always like, how do you use the data to distill out different mechanisms inside the business if you thought about it as a machine, and then what those levers are and what those predictors can be, and then run tests against it. Right.
And how do you? That's the question.
Yeah. So a lot of what I do is like distilling it into more segments and like fundamental behaviors. So rather than, I think a lot of people just run statistics on it and it tells you statistical models.
Right.
I like to run it in a way where you find the mechanisms behind things beyond just a statistical model around it.
That makes a lot of sense. It's almost like looking at motivations behind actions. Then,
correct.
Right? Yeah.
So therefore you have like more levers that you can pull, like especially earlier on.
Yeah.
Because especially earlier on in startups, what happens is you change a lever, it changes the statistical model, but you don't know what changed in the statistical model.
Unless you find out what's behind it.
Exactly. Right. But if you already have the parameters fixed, like the levers that you know what you pulled, you can test against it. Right. You can like better simulate it, right? You can also use those levers to better define like the audiences, if it's consumer, right? Or the business you're selling to, or the leads, because you know what is the driving psychological factor behind why they're sticky and why they're using it versus just like stats.
Right.
Right. And so did a lot of that. That's really what I talk about a lot, is like rather than thinking of data science, that's why it's called data science, right? Like there should be a definition of what mechanisms go into it and you should test against it. Right. It's not just like pure stats, which I think, especially with AI, we've seen an increased direction into
more
like stats and people forgetting what the stats actually mean.
Exactly. And exactly. They don't know what's behind it. Then it doesn't really go anywhere. Do you know what I'm saying? Then it's just stagnant in a way. It's like, then it becomes a thing that you know about, but you don't know how to alter it because you don't know what's behind it.
Well, you also don't know when it breaks. Yeah. That's also the hard part, right? Because if you have, as I say, like dramatic shifts or like cataclysmic shifts in your product, none of your stats models apply, or large parts of it won't apply. But why? And which ones still work? Becomes like really important for stitching, right? But so worked at startups for a bit, and then that's how I ended up getting exposed to more venture capital. Then I remember what I thought about venture capitalists. And then I was like, oh, it'd be really interesting if venture capital used more data. Like, why are we not using data if all the companies have data? So that was the original theory, is that more data should be brought into venture. So you can see a broader scope of companies, but also be able to like check the validity of the data. So I've always said data informed in venture is really important, especially like earlier stage, not data driven. So I think the difference between the Wall Street model and a venture model is in venture, you want the outliers. So your error
want the
really,
outliers.
Yeah. You want to also know what the outliers are, because a lot of what traditionally is modeled out or is considered potentially outlier could be the right thing.
That's right.
So the type of error that is digestible in a venture model is very different. So if you use it to filter, right, to pick a company, you're more likely to pick wrong.
You're more likely to pick wrong if you're not looking for the outliers. Is that correct?
Because you're just picking inside your bias.
Right. You're in the bias
of what previously existed.
of what is normal for VCs. See, you're so perfect for this because you allowed yourself, your family allowed you, your parents allowed you to be an outlier whenever you wanted to be, to push the envelope, to go outside, to do the things you wanted to do,
Yeah.
and people said yes to you when you'd go to their office
It's true.
and pitch them
Yeah.
on
And
your
to be
idea.
fair, honestly, like the fact that, data became a thing, I'm like really happy it did because back then, everyone, it was like a new thing to be like,
yeah.
what? You can use, I think Signal Fire was using it a lot. That was pretty much it.
We only knew what we knew at that time.
Yeah.
We don't want to go back and make fun of ourselves too much. We
Yeah.
only knew that much, and now we've moved on, and we know more.
It's because I was on this like data team in Wall Street that then come here, I was like, look, we could pull all sorts of data.
Yeah.
Like I know what websites have traffic.
Right.
Now it's harder, but like back then you can like scrape social accounts, etc. It's all public. So you could just like show signals before anyone noticed in like the rest of the country. So like all things about binary side, we invested in a lot of metros that is now really hot. So like we looked at Denver companies, we looked at Chicago companies, we looked at Austin companies in like 2014, 15, right? Because if you're canvassing the data, there's no bias of like what party I went to and whom I spoke to. We also saw a lot of diverse founders. That portfolio actually had really diverse founders because you have a much bigger funnel that is not biased by who do you know. And so I think that's the other trend of my life is I'm very much like a fairness and justice person, right? And so for me, there was also like, if you look at most industries, as it becomes more quantitatively based, it becomes more fair. Mm-hmm. Like marketing tech, if you look at Mad Men era marketing versus now, it's much more gender distributed and much more fair. You look at hedge funds, like Wolf of Wall Street era, to now you have a lot of quant funds where the best managers are women or folks of color. And it's because of that. Because if you're like, hey, I could just pull the stock info and I can pick and I'm smart, I'm good, my portfolio is good, it is what it is, right? Mm-hmm. And part of me is like, oh, if we could pick startups closer to that, then that would be better. I think it's gotten a lot more mutated now in terms of how VCs use data, and I talk about it all the time. I think it's actually really bad because a lot of VCs have built models where they put in their own bias into the funnel.
See, that's hard when you build your own model. Yeah. It's hard to not put your own bias in,
because
right?
Like sometimes someone has to hold the line and be like, you say that YC founders are better or that repeat entrepreneurs are better. So now that's your filter. That's like a flag that you've added 0, 1, or however many points to. And now you're not going to see outside of what you already
what you already biased
and
about.
those biases existed because of systemic bias, and you can't actually unbias it. If you keep bias, you don't have unbiased data.
Well, that's where
basically.
it is. That's where it is.
Right?
You can't unbias if you're basing it on systemic bias, and you've got
it's like a self-looping.
Exactly. Yeah. Somebody has to break out of that.
Yeah.
So you became somebody who you worked your way into venture. You started working for companies. Now I know that venture has traditionally been really male dominated, and there you were, with all of what's going on up here, and smarter than probably, remember that old movie, Smartest Guys in the Room? This was you coming in and speaking, and there's bias, there's gender bias. There you are, you come into a boardroom, nobody there is going to know. She's probably smarter than anyone here. So what have you done about that?
I've been asked to take notes a lot. Actually.
How about coffee? Anybody ask for coffee?
I've had founders come into the office, see me, not having done research, which is like a slight problem, ask me for coffee.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, so this is, I think, where I take a more amusing approach to it. I think most people would be like, no, like, no. So when they ask me for coffee, I'm like, okay, well, how would you like your coffee? And I would give it to them.
And then they find out who you are.
And then I sit down. And I'm now you may proceed. Now you'll remember not to do that again. Versus if I just yell at you, it won't have the same impact of that awkward moment.
I know. I did the same thing when I owned the television company. If I met somebody at the elevator and they didn't know who I was, they would assume I was the admin. And they would start asking me for stuff. And I'd start getting it for them. And then they'd go, oh, you're the owner? And I'm like, yeah, I have to go mop the floor now, or something. But I sit and talk with them, but they would be like, oh, I had no idea. But it's good. It's good. You hope they've learned something.
Yeah, and I think
You
that
don't always
moment
know if they have.
registers better than someone telling
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
and you get defensive, whereas you're
Yeah.
just like,
No.
oh.
Humor is good. Humor teaches and keeps people, open so that they listen and learn. But okay, so then what happened next? You
I
found
mean,
yourself you found yourself in a boys' club a lot of the time, and what have you tell stories about that, whatever you want to talk about.
so I think, a lot of the first wave, I call it 2 phases of venture. The first part of venture where I was at Binary Capital, I think is pretty public in the news, and folks can read about that. I tend to not go into it as
Yeah,
much detail anymore.
Right.
But I think I'll talk about it holistically first. So
Mm-hmm.
I went through Binary, and obviously, given the circumstances, I at first couldn't work in venture basically for a bit until things were resolved. So I started my own advisory practice where I was helping founders kind of in the same way as if I was an investor, just not with my own money, basically, but
Mm-hmm.
also helping them figure out how to grow properly, etc. And one of the things I learned is that if you're an underappreciated founder, as I call it, then your numbers need to just be so much better. Like, it doesn't matter what people tell you about how you present, etc. If you're not in a hot zone for topics, your numbers just has to look better, maybe 1.5 to 2x better. And then
Mm-hmm.
people are like, oh my God, wait, that's surprising. Okay. And you need that moment of like where you surprise them
Where
with
you get their
something.
attention.
Right. And so typically when I work with companies, we're trying to capture something in that performance or numbers or realization that can trigger that effect so they can effectively fundraise.
Right.
And I was also trying to talk to a lot of folks about just like better ways of using data. And to be fair, I'm quite frustrated that everyone likes to build these biases in. And I think
Right.
like that doesn't help the industry get better,
Right.
to be honest. And so ended up working in venture again as a partner at a different firm, which we can also see in
We
the
can also,
news
yeah.
also.
You don't need to mention names. No names.
But
We're fine.
that's also
Concepts,
public, right?
and
And I think,
yeah.
what I realized is that venture is just fundamentally like harder to correct when it comes to fairness. Like, I think the structure of the model in terms of the feedback cycle, in terms of what is successful, and all the almost like self-afflicted reasons for why things don't work continues to not work, right? So if you say a female founder isn't able to raise as well down the line and can't make it to exit more frequently, they can't raise later rounds, blah blah blah, etc. And then your filters are what they are, which is like serial entrepreneurs who do all these things, etc. It necessarily is biased. So if you can't raise the next round, you can't make it to the next round, you can't make it to an exit. Right. And it's the same way in venture. If you're a female partner and you need, or just an underrepresented partner, right? And you need to make it to enough numbers to justify something, and everyone gatekeeps you along the way, you're just also not going to make it.
Yeah, you can't.
Because it's all
can't get
dependent
there.
on the next person doing your round. And the
then-
next person
And you're
is
dealing
biased.
you're dealing with bias at all those levels.
Right.
So it
Like,
continues
the people
the
controlling the
cycle.
money is biased.
Yeah.
And they fuel that bias by making it true.
There's the sentence. They fuel that bias by making it true. And that's true in so many areas. I mean, that is really that's what's going on. So there was a lot of talk, maybe 6-7 years ago about DEI. And now what is it, a swear word? I mean, we don't even know anymore. What do you see changing now? Do you see change? Do you see change in the venture world? Do you see more openness for female founders? Do you see that anybody's recognizing their bias that's causing them failure?
I think there are more funds now in the very early stages by women GPs who've spun out.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to women's side, at least, or even like people of color. So also funds that are dedicated to those aspects, or are GPs who represent those demographics.
Mm-hmm.
And so earlier on, you're seeing better funding. Then you get to the same stage where it's gated by what I call, probably politically incorrectly, but white tech bro dominated series.
Thank you.
And then it's blocked anyway.
It's just blocked.
So if you're a female centric fund, you
Mhm.
should theoretically, if everything were fair, would probably do better given what we know of personalities that build companies, et cetera, like actually.
Mhm.
But you're statistically inclined to fail, not because of the companies, but because of the racial bias
The
when you
racial
come
bias,
of funding
the
when you
gender
come to that
bias.
gatekeeping rounds,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
And so it's like I find it hard to fix because they don't
Hard to
really need to,
fix.
right? And nobody actually wants to look at data, right? Like people talk about data all the time. We've already talked about how sourcing, they use data in a flawed way. Not everyone, I would say the like majority, right? It's like there are interesting folks doing different things for sure, always, but they're not the mainstream core. So when I say
Right.
like
Right.
venture, I mean more just mainstream core. Um, and then nobody's checking the data. Like nobody's doing real diligence. Right. You look at what happened with the Frank deal. You look at that 11x piece that came out.
Right.
There's a couple others. This is actually what I give some lectures around. Like people don't know what they're looking at, so they don't even ask the right questions. And the companies are now smart enough to do really clever things around data. That is not fraud, but
Clever as in
is certainly,
manipulating.
yes, but it's
Mhm.
certainly not representative of the shape of the company. But it's
Mhm.
also your job, right? Or like AVC's job to figure out what is the shape of the company.
What's the shape of the company? What's been manipulated? What's true?
Yeah,
What's
like what
real?
is the actual retention?
Yeah.
Right. So one of my questions I always ask when people say like, "Oh, my monthly active user is this and my retention is this," right? I'm like, why monthly? Some products are not meant to be monthly. If you're a messaging app and you're using monthly, it means I
Mhm.
use it once a month. That counts. Like
Yeah.
that probably shouldn't count, right?
Yeah.
So the cadence is the problem, but also like what is active. Like nobody thinks about what is active anymore. It could be like I opened an app, I clicked on a notification, I was logged in. But some people use auto logins. Some people do push notifications, just open it briefly. Is there a minimum time threshold? Are
Right.
they actually using an
Are they
action?
using it, or is that just, can you manipulate that to change your
Right. So
data?
they could pick whatever signals and
Yeah.
call it
Yeah. Yeah.
active.
Yeah.
And so now your active could mean like I open an app, or in a different company, it could mean like I actually like sent an email or made a transaction.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
The latter is going to have a smaller pool, but more real. Right.
So by having a smaller pool, their numbers don't look as good.
Exactly. So the more honest founders
I
I
see what you're
found
talking
have
about.
terrible charts. And so one of the other parts I
Oh
did
gosh.
as a VC,
Oh,
what I do
that's
now
so
still
sad.
is like I
Yeah.
look at all the data and I
Yeah.
reverse engineer them so
Yeah.
they're apples to apples.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I line up their retention charts.
So you have to, otherwise it doesn't
Right.
make any
So what I
sense.
noticed early on is like a lot of Midwest founders, right? Not coached by the standard programs in venture, will just show me the cohorts, like the retention charts
Yeah.
as they are,
Yeah.
like basically unfiltered. So
Honest and
yeah, and then you
Mhm.
go to another one, it'll be like, for people who have made 12 purchases, this is what their retention looks like. And you're like, okay, so it's gonna look way better, but it might only be like 20% of their whole user base.
right.
But like people are thinking, oh, 70 plus retention,
It has
80% is great.
Yeah.
They got there by manipulating the data.
Yeah.
Whereas the
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
side would just show you like 65, and most VCs would be like, oh, that's not good enough. And so therefore it's never going to be fair. So
So
I tell all my founders, I'm like, look, it's like Instagram filters. Everyone's using them. Like if
Mhm.
you want to like raise, you also have to cut your data. But then in your data room, have the real data or explain it. But like this is the expectation is that you have to match what's being put
you
out
have
in the
to match
market.
what's being looked for, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to get through the gate
Other
where people
people,
even
yeah,
talk
yeah,
to you. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think like that's a game somebody has to tell
That's a
everyone.
tough one. And somebody, somebody has to say it. Might as well be you, right?
But I think that's also why you like the data thing is actually
Yeah.
feeding the bias because
Yeah.
everyone who's
Yeah.
trained knows
Yeah.
how to game the system. You
Yeah.
game the system and nobody's checking, it just
Yeah.
makes it
Yeah.
worse.
Yeah.
And then the speed of the deals are now even hotter. So it's even faster. So they don't even have time to do diligence. I've
Yeah.
seen VCs being like, oh, I did a deal in like less than 3 days. See how awesome. Like that should not be an awesome thing.
No, that doesn't. No, somebody needs to really look and comb through it. So I have two questions, really. One is it changing in terms of letting women through those gates? People besides you letting them through, and the other is, um, do you have a good story about an amazing woman founder? You know, anybody who has a really good story, who came in with data that wasn't manipulated, you help them figure out how to get their numbers up, and they're doing great.
Yeah. So I think with AI, it is getting better.
With AI?
I think
I was
because
going
you
to ask
need
about
less.
AI too.
Yeah. So I think more AI wave, as I call it, right? A bigger part of it just reducing the capital needs of getting to certain numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So really, I don't know if it's making venture better. It's making building companies better because you need VCs less. It's probably a really
You need
spicy
VCs
take.
less because you have AI instead. Is that
But you
correct?
don't need as much capital. So why raise so much? Like, I think there are many things I feel about AI. I think AI is a platform shift that is like what we saw in big data. It's not a category. It's just a fundamental new tooling platform that's going to evolve how we do things. And we don't quite know what that will look like. But I think much like the last era, it collapses the time and capital scale of what you need to build companies.
Yeah, that was going to be a big question about how, about AI. Let's keep talking about that then and go down that road. Because, and what you just said is basically a new tool, it's collapsing the time needed. That's very specific to what you're talking about. Do you have an opinion or feelings or what you've noticed about AI in general? You know how people are freaking out about it or embracing it as the greatest love of their life. So it's like I know people on both ends of the
Yeah.
spectrum.
Look, I think the reaction is always there every time you have a new wave
Every
of
time
tech.
something new
Like,
happens.
remember when we had the first like mobile phones? People were like,
Oh,
"Oh,
yeah.
it's gonna track us. We're gonna know where everyone is." You're like,
Yeah.
"Yes, this is how we
Horseless
have Uber."
carriages, even. I mean, everything. There's always people don't like
Or like
change,
big data. They're like,
and
"Oh,
they get
everyone
really
will know your health data somewhere. Everyone's health data is somewhere
Yeah.
in a big database,
Yeah.
right?" Obviously, there are a lot of issues with AI. I think when it comes to attribution, when it comes to different, like real versus not. I think that is a fundamental problem, is that we don't have a great sense of what's real anymore. Or like, whether it's facts, whether it's news, whether it's, just like knowledge based generally.
Right.
Right. But I also think it does open up a lot of opportunities, and we're going to have to think about how we work differently. Yes, people talk about autonomous, the robots or whatnot replacing. People talk a lot about autonomous systems replacing humans.
Autonomous systems.
Right. Yeah. So like robotics or whatnot replacing like human labor,
taking over the world.
Right. But also at the same time, we will evolve different jobs. Right. And we will also be able to train people to do higher level jobs.
Well, that's the thing about change that people forget. It's like they want to keep doing this one thing, but once you bring something else in, there's other things that you can do.
Look at the Ford assembly line.
Exactly.
Right. Like,
yeah.
Build a lot of backbone of America, I would say, right?
Yeah.
And so fundamentally, that's more holistic, right? And I think within venture, like I said, I think it collapses time skills, and then it's going to change the categories of focus. If you look at big data when it came out, right, there were a lot of companies that was focused on like analytics, et cetera, like MarTech, like easy aspects of how that could be immediately applied. All of those ended up pretty much dying, right? But it unlocked for us new categories that we didn't think we would ever really do, right? Like fintech, digital health, et cetera. I think we're going to see very similar trends when it comes to AI, right? We're going to see a bunch of categories that people are really excited about that will become null. Basically, they're just tools. They'll never make it to an equity exit unless they do it really quickly, because they'll just be obsolete and buildable easily by like any college student, basically, in their basement.
Right.
But separately, it allows us to do things that we also thought were harder or too long. So I think this is where the science comes full circle. I think a lot of science-related technologies that everyone was like, takes too much time, takes too much capital. Like those are the things that are interesting, or like supply chain logistics, et cetera. So these like more complex, nuanced, like large scale, large capital need problems.
This is how AI can be superimposed into those areas and cut the time, cut the money needed.
And so those areas have a lot more true, like I would say, like fundamental expertise, right? You have to know robotics to do robotics. You have to know science to do science.
Right.
And if we looked at the STEM education percentages, it's actually pretty equivalent. Not if in certain categories, there are more women than men with PhDs and higher degrees. And so like, I think that necessarily will shift the bias, because that's not just I want to build this, but everyone can build it. So it's super biased in who might choose to build it. Like those, you actually have to have experts, right?
Yes.
And so even when I went to a volunteer this year with the Science Talent Search or the International Science Engineering Fair, the winners are extremely well distributed, right?
Okay.
So if that's like our future demographic of folks who are scientists, like if we're doing more science and technical related funding, it will be less biased, I think, because you're pulling from real expertise there.
And real expertise can be anyone if you're really looking for experts.
Right. And certainly more equivalent because it
Equivalent,
already
and you're
is.
not just you're not just chopping it off with the bias that you had
Yeah,
before.
you're not like, oh, you're building a consumer app.
Right.
Everyone can build a consumer app. So it's whomever I like today to build that consumer app, right? And then separately, I feel like a lot of the other types of companies require a lot less capital. So now you're not dependent as heavily on VCs to give you money to survive, to get to the next stage, right? We've seen a lot of companies that can go like 0 to 6 million in 1 year without raising any VC.
Right.
Nobody needs them. If you don't need them, you don't have to play the system.
Yeah.
You just make a lot of money, then do whatever you want. Build another company, fund somebody else, seed a studio, right? Like you don't need the same amount of dependency on pleasing this or fitting into the venture ecosystem. I think that's like really exciting for me because
that is.
You can just be like,
I see. Yeah, no, I see how that helps. No. So that's kind of painting a brighter picture in some ways that maybe a lot of people don't know about. And
I think people just need to break out because I think VCs have convinced everyone it's really important to raise money. Right. If you look at it, right, like every PR announcement is around so-and-so raised X million dollars. Yeah. You know, they just put themselves in more debt or sold on more stuff. It's not actually like a market. It's not like blah, 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 crested X dollars in revenue, right? It's X company raised so much money.
So much money.
And so it makes everyone think your merit badge is how much you raise.
Right.
And so they keep, like, even if you're profitable and growing a lot, they're like, I have to go raise venture. And then I talk to them like, why? Why do you use venture?
You might not need it. So again, the question for fun, was there ever anyone that you supported who nobody else was really paying attention to and she went on to do something fantastic?
So I think one of my most vivid memories of how this applies, and I thought was extremely unfair. So one of the founders I backed earlier on at Binary is named Lee Mayer, and she's the founder of Havenly.
Havenly?
Havenly, yep. They were originally already backed by Foundry. So that's the other group that has supported her a lot along the way. And I remember we found her stats and I was like, this is so good. And all the competitors that were Silicon Valley, I was like, the numbers are just not as good. Like, her numbers are efficient. She knows what she's talking about. Like, it's great. And everyone was like, she doesn't seem like the right fit.
A great fit because, what was it, because she's a woman?
She's a woman.
And they're so slam the first door with bias.
And also she's very nice.
That just doesn't seem like somebody who could possibly succeed. How could nice women succeed in this
like
world?
Nice in a polite way, in conversation.
Yeah.
And it's just like normal, like talks like a normal person who's like nice and friendly, right? And the other part is everyone said she was really attractive and therefore couldn't possibly be good.
Couldn't possibly be good because she's too pretty.
And the perception.
See, this just goes on and on, though. Yeah.
And I was like, did you see her numbers?
Yeah.
Like, did you actually listen to the things she says? Like, this company is infinitely better than any other company everyone's funding. Everyone else got funded way more. She's had waves of competitors that was just like overcapitalized. And she's taken them out. Like, she's won like every single time. Like, her competitors don't really exist. But to this day, every time she raises, it's still difficult.
Yeah.
And they're doing phenomenally.
Oh, that's so
and
good.
There's a lot of PR about them. They've acquired a lot of like consumer brands, companies, etc. as well. Yeah. They're basically in the interior design space. So originally they were, so you can consult with an interior designer and they would map out your room. You can buy it in a room setting. And they would suggest furniture and you can buy through them. But a lot of the work was done on the logistics side and actually being like really fine-tuned when it comes to marketing and really understanding like what interior designers needed. Obviously, it's evolved a lot since then, but I think a lot of the stats we looked at back then when their interior designers had really good retention, right? The way they were designing the packages when it comes to like the monetization model was really good. And their numbers were much more economically efficient because she was fundamentally always undercapitalized. So she figured out how to be monetarily.
How to do it without
Yes.
a huge capital
Yeah.
investment.
And she's very on top of every nuance that could happen and like the different opportunity
That's so
pockets.
great.
And, you know, they're doing really well. And every time they do well after other capitalized, or I would say like much more capitalized competitors go
Yeah.
under, I'm like, hey, look, we were right.
You were right all along.
And I think that's part of it. Like when you're undercapitalized, you just learn to be cash efficient.
Right.
But sometimes for not a lot of companies, for many companies,
Mhm.
even if you are at some point, you just need capital because
Right.
and you just can't get it, and you might only need 500, but like that's what's going to take you under, right?
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
like really annoying for me because you're like, if you looked at the numbers, it makes so much more sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
But venture is about these like fake metrics half the time.
Well, you keep doing what you're doing and keep steering the ship as best you can, you know, to make things change. And
Although I'm working on something else differently now.
what are you working on now?
So I got married last year. So I took a
What? I didn't know that you got married.
So I got
last
married
year.
in October.
Yes.
I actually met my husband diving. So that's my now obsessive hobbies. I've always been really into marine science.
Oh,
That's
I
like
love scuba diving.
yes,
I love
scuba diving. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I love scuba diving. I think for me,
It's like flying.
exactly. It's like space,
Yeah,
right? You're like
yeah.
weightless.
Yeah.
And everything is just phenomenal,
Yeah.
right? And so I got really into scuba diving during basically binary and bullpen. And I think for me, it's like a little bit of science and then a lot of like activity, but it's like everything is, I think, awesome in like the fundamental original definition of awesome, which is just like awe-inspiring,
It
right?
completely a totally different world that we don't get to see unless we go down to that world.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
And you know, down in the long run, I want to do a lot more when it comes to like ocean science, etc.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think you just do that when you have a lot of money
Yeah.
because it's really hard to run as a nonprofit.
Yeah.
But I think so. Anyway, so I met him diving, and then we got married last year. I was originally intending on raising a venture fund that was focused on what I call science tech, so different technology and rails around sciences. I'm still doing that in part, but I think the little bit of time off I took to do my wedding. So we got married in the UK because he's British, and then
Where did you get married?
we got married in Oxford because he's
in Oxford.
British.
He's British.
And then we had another like ceremony, but banquet ceremony style in Taiwan with all of my extended family.
Oh, nice.
So it's basically like two massive productions.
Yeah.
And look, the market wasn't great, and I have felt some resistance even inside myself around like, is venture the right model?
Right.
But so I took some time off and got married, and I came back in February. And basically, I've been rethinking like a lot of what we've spoken about. So this is actually the first time I'm sharing this.
Oh, this is really interesting.
Publicly.
Oh, this is great. So what's the next? So what is the next wave for you?
So I think for me, venture is very much a pick and let live game now, right? I think venture has a lot of mantras I fundamentally realize just I personally don't agree with, right?
Yeah.
So power law, I think, has gotten quite warped in its interpretation. Like it used to be like every company should be able to have the capacity of returning your fund.
Right.
And now it's a lot more one company needs to return your fund and the rest can like, who cares? Which I think is like, that's not why I got into venture, right? I got into venture because I wanted to help companies get to their full potential, or like companies that deserve it can have the chance of exiting, whatever that size is, etc. And so a lot of folks have always said, like, I work too hard with companies and should just like let them go. I'm like, if I have time, why wouldn't I?
Yeah.
And you know, maybe it gets ugly in the end, but like at least like we tried.
You tried, and you tried.
Right. And so that and I don't quite agree. And then separately, I think there's this whole bit also around your best companies don't require that much work. So if companies require a lot of work, then it's not really like deserved feeling, which I also disagree with.
Right.
And so, you know, you see a lot of these companies now that are kind of stuck in this middle where they're ill-defined inside their own VC's portfolio. Like they're not the clear winners. They're kind of tapering and they've propped them up. They're hitting like different issues when it comes to capitalization or debt covenants or whatnot, and they need a little bit of money. And nobody knows if those companies are good or bad.
Yeah.
Right? Or very few people outside of the company. Or even like within VC, they don't know how to look at a thing that isn't hyper growing and figure it out.
Right.
Right.
Because
And
they haven't
so,
studied the data in the way that you did. And so, but you're telling me, though, that there's a new thing that you're
yes.
starting to
So
move into.
basically, we're working on a different structure to be able to help these companies kind of like rewind or like figure out whether it's the right state. So I've been
Aha.
helping a lot of companies.
Rewind as in go back to when they were successful and figure out what happened, what was the mechanism that
Right.
changed their trajectory.
Yeah. So if you think about it, some of these companies have really good core bits
Mm-hmm.
that are really good inside the company, whether it's revenue lines for products
Right.
or pockets of demographics or whatnot.
And then other things
And then
that
other
just,
things that maybe
you can
because they were
toss 'em.
pushed to hyper growing
Yeah.
are really inefficient.
Right.
Right. So you can figure out of these middle, which ones are better and which ones are worse, and find the
Right.
good ones
Right.
and help them retransition into what a stable, proper growth revenue looks like. Might not be as big as they originally
I see
projected,
what you're
but will
talking
be
about.
profitable.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I think the emphasis now is like, how do we build profitable companies?
And go back to the core of what was working to begin with.
Yeah. And the
Yeah.
core of like originally company building, it wasn't
Yeah.
just to like burn money forever,
Yeah.
right? Like,
What was the purpose? Yeah. What did you, yeah, exactly.
yeah. And so, I think there's also a lot more room for companies to exit if they're small, not small, but like, medium size, like couple $100 million, but like cash flow positive
Right.
or EBITDA positive, right? Like that's a very different shape of opportunity for exits than all
Right.
these folks trying to chase an IPO
Right.
that may
Right.
or may
Right.
not
Right.
happen. And then everyone gets worn out, et cetera, and
And
whatnot.
you're going to do that on your own, forming your own company to look at things this way, or is this?
It's basically going to be a combination of traditional like venture primary
Mhm,
funding and
mhm.
secondaries.
Okay.
So using that kind of combination of funding plus some debt, et cetera, to help like re-engineer the financial side of the company, and like do a little bit of restructuring, but in a way that is like healthy for the company and the founders, and
That
not
just
in a
sounds so much
traditional
better.
PE. Yeah.
I kind of felt a breath of fresh air or something, because I look at venture, everything you've said is exactly when I look at it, it has felt locked in and cumbersome. And what you're talking about now is looking for fresh air, basically.
Yeah. And I wasn't sure if I was going to talk about it, but we're about to write
thank
about
you.
it.
I
So.
really appreciate, and I really appreciate everything you've shared here today. And this is really great. It's been so, so nice to have you as a guest. We'll follow along and see what you do next.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your marriage. I didn't know about that. So
big life step.
I know.
Took a detour, did some life things. It was kind of important.
So nice. No, so nice. Thanks so much. It's really great.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Anita Castellina, host of the podcast Navigating, where I talk with people about how they are finding their way through these challenging times. Navigating couldn't happen without you, so please be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, which you can find by searching Navigating Podcast or with the links we provide in every episode description and social media bio. And if you're subscribed now, you may want to turn on the bell for notifications of the latest episodes and clips. If you like Navigating, let us know. Tell us in the comments and share with your friends. All of this helps Navigating continue to grow so we can bring you more valuable conversations. And as always, thanks so much for watching.